You're listening to the Paul Young Podcast.
Tell me about your trip to India, because that's one of the things you shared with me as we sat, me and Kim and Kara, as we sat around the fire that one night.
Oh, yeah. Was Wes and his wife were
Yes,
with us too, weren't they?
Wes and Linda were there too.
You know, the weirdest thing, just this week, Paul, I hadn't thought about some of my trips in such a long, long time. But I got a call this week from an old friend of mine who's Cuban by birth. And they said he was in elementary school when he was 5 years old. And the soldiers walked in and told them, said, look, I want you to pray to your God that he'll give you candy right now. And so the children prayed and there was no candy. He said they were soldiers in fatigues. He said, now I want you to pray to Fidel that he'll give you candy. And so they prayed to Fidel that he'll give them candy. And then they opened up their pockets and started passing out candy. And he said that's the first thing he knew of what was going on. And then every year, in order to try to convince people that they were free in Cuba, they would let a certain number of families, they would draw, and it was a lottery. And they got to leave and go to the United States. And then, of course, that was proof that they were free to leave. And his family won the lottery. And they moved to Florida, and he's been there ever since. Well, I met him. He's an Episcopalian guy. No, Nazarene guy. And I met him through, you remember the Toronto blessing?
Oh, yeah.
I met him through that whole experience. He invited me to go to Honduras with him one time. I went down with him. I took a small group from the little church I was pastoring. And he said, you guys get some sleep during the daytime because we'll be going out tonight. And I didn't really know what he meant. We just did what he said, you know. And that night, at about 10 o'clock, we had dinner. Of course, they eat a late dinner. They had a nice dinner, not in a restaurant. It was cooked by some locals there. It was great. And then he said, okay, we're going. And we got in these vans and went to the middle of Tegucigalpa, in their capital city there, in this area called the Bethlehem District. And interesting enough, the Bethlehem District was the prostitution district. And there were 2,000 children who were living on their own in the streets, street kids, in that area. And at nighttime, he and his little church and their young people, they would have been saving most of their money for food. And they would go down at nighttime 3 nights a week, and they would feed 2,000 children. Kids were everywhere. They were being born to some of the young teenagers or some mothers that would lose them somehow. And these kids were naming babies. They were like 10 and 12-year-olds naming children and caring for them as adults. And I'd never seen anything like it in my life. It just blew us away. I was lucky to get to be a part of things like that. Chuck invited me to go to India with him. We were there for 3 weeks. We were in the interior of India, and I can't even remember all the places that we were. I know we were in Mumbai for a little while, but not long. And we spent about a week in a leper colony, helping move some pipes up higher on the sides of their little huts. Because they had no fingers, they couldn't hold cups to get water out of. So they needed for the pipes to be moved up higher, and they could put their arms around a larger item, a bigger bucket, and catch water coming from the top down. But I mean, that was just so amazing to see how I'm such an excuse maker. I don't know any other way to say it.
Uh-huh.
They never complain. There's no excuses. It's just life. That blew me away. And then probably the thing that I'd never witnessed before that blew me away. And to this day, I can't explain it. I don't know how. But they'd ask us to talk and to come to this tent thing that they had out in this community. And if we would share. And so Chuck got up and he talked, it was good. And I saw a bunch of children playing over here to the side. It was during the daytime. And so I went over and sat down with these kids, sat down on the dirt with these kids, and they came around. And someone came over that spoke English, and I was talking with the kids back and forth, and we were having a good time.
And weren't you instructed to teach a little lesson to them or something? And
yeah, and so I was talking about how plants grow, and I forget the passage.
Doesn't matter.
But yeah, it doesn't matter. But it was about how they're like these beautiful plants, and they need to, just like they need water to grow and keep them healthy, they need fresh water, which would be like the Holy Spirit, the presence of God in their life, and it'll help them grow.
And you were feeling like the man of God in faith?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I was Billy Graham waiting to to burst forth right there. It was amazing. And I was the center of it. I was already getting my story together, how I was going to tell it when I got home, And this little man came over and just bumped right into me. He had this stick. He had a staff that he was walking with, and he was a little bitty fella. And I was nice to him at that point and just asked him to back up just a little bit and let me finish, and the guy told him what I said. And then I started back again on my powerful sermon. And he bumped into me again, whacked me on the side of the head with a stick then. And so I got a little pissed at him, Paul. I mean, I was thinking that obviously he does not know who I am. And the great white hope, I mean, India's been waiting on me forever. Who is Gandhi? I mean, and then the third time he walked right into me at that point, and I yelled at him and went right back to speaking again to these kids. And then another guy standing there poked me on the shoulder. And I said, would you mind? I am trying to finish this story to these children. And he said, look. And I looked and I said, okay. And I said, why? And he said, he was blind. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I was pissed off at him because he was blind. Can you say pissed off on your podcast?
Sure. Yep. I say shit. So there you go.
I got some North Alabama in me that ain't out yet. Probably will never be. Anyway, I thought, okay, he's blind. He said, but look. And he was smiling. And he puts his hand on my face and starts feeling on my nose and my face. And they explained to me that he lives there. He's been blind his entire life. Like the mayor of that region was standing there. He says he knows him. He's been blind his whole life. And his eyes have just opened up.
And didn't you, when you were mad at him, didn't you just say something like, well, then be healed?
Well, it was kind of like I might as well have thrown a rock at him. I mean, it was that kind of ugliness on my part. Like, fine. So you're blind. Okay. Just, will you be quiet? It was almost like I was wishing instead of being blind that he couldn't speak. And so then I turned around and they're all crying. These adults are. And this man is seeing everything for the first time, touching everything he can see. Of which, obviously, if you'd have said, Tony, would you love to pray for someone that's blind and they be healed? I'd have said, oh, yes. Let that happen, Lord. And, I mean, the guy had to dang near knock me out with a stick just to get me to notice that he can now see, and I did not have a thing to do with it. Not only did I not pray for him to be healed, I got pissed off at him and cursed him pretty much. It's a wonder he didn't want to leave blind and a deaf mute and crippled. The way that I treated that man. And it took me a long time to work through the realization that not only is God beyond my imagination, he doesn't really need me. They
I get it.
Yeah, don't really need me. I mean, they'll let me play. They'll let me be a part. But really, most of the time, it's just that, would you at least be aware, Tony? Would you just become aware and inquisitive and listen and notice? Would you become a noticer?
Yeah.
So much is happening without you that you're not even noticing.
Wow. What happened later that evening?
So he jumps up. So they went back to the tent thing, And then if you're talking about that part of it, and I look down, and I have a photograph on a phone somewhere that that no longer works. But I was standing up speaking in English, and someone was telling him what I was saying. And I looked down, and he's sitting on the stage, right down on the corner. He's just sitting there looking out at everybody and staring at him. And then the music broke out, and they started dancing. They're dancing around and in lines. And it was beautiful to see. And there he was, just dancing his little rear end off. And there I was, like...
Well, that happened.
And Tony, you almost missed it all.
Yeah. And then later, wasn't it like the middle of the night when there was this gathering in the middle of the town square? All these divided communities,
Oh, yes. They were coming together.
Yeah, the Muslims were sitting in the Muslim section, and the
Yeah.
Christians in the Christian section, and the Hindus in the Hindu section.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, but he just busted all that open.
Yeah. He walks in and the place went nuts.
They went nuts. He busted all of that open. And the people were just, they couldn't, because all of them knew him.
Yeah.
All of them knew him. And Chuck Crisco said to me, he said, well, I'd love to bring you along to other things I'm going to do, but I'm not sure I need you because I'm going to take him. He's more aware than you are. And I was like, but I get it. I know. And I didn't feel terrible. It was like another eye-opening thing that the source of all that exists doesn't need me to do something for them.
Yeah.
They just would love for me to experience love, their love, not to find out about healing, but to find out about me.
Yeah. This is not a God who can be served by human hands as if he needed anything.
No. I mean, he's not writing a book. They're not writing a book, and they need my stories.
Right.
They just love for me to know how loved I am. As Francois told that story that night, by that father and by that shepherd, who later that shepherd is the son, and by that woman who probably has a good shot at being Holy Spirit.
Yeah, that's what I think. I do. I think that's a Trinity parable. All the three in a row. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about your son.
Well, I don't know where to start. I mean, I knew he was special early on. His mother and I knew that there was something special about him. He noticed everything that we did not. He was unbelievably playful and artistic at an early age. I think he was probably about 8 or 9 when I was teaching him how to ride lawnmower and the push mower and how to trim the hedges. And so I told him, I said, son, I'm going to get on a riding lawnmower. You see those hedges right in front of the house? See how they're straight across at the top? He said, yes, sir. And I said, I just need you to just take about an inch off all the way down from one end of the house to the other. He said, okay. Well, I went around to the back and I started mowing the grass. And when I returned to the other side, to the front, there they were. Minnie, Mickey, Donald. He had cut. He had taken those trimmers and cut my shrubs into Disney characters. And it was so obvious which ones they were. I mean, anybody else would have said, how amazing. I was so pissed. I so missed what he didn't. We lived across the street from Old Hickory Lake there just outside of Nashville, and he'd go over during the daytime, and the lake was right across the street. He'd play in the water in the edge, and he'd come home with fish and frogs and lizards and snakes in his pockets. He'd take them sneak them in his room. One day I heard this loud scream, and his mother was in there cleaning his room, and he had a cardboard castle on top of his dresser. She was just about to dust it off when she noticed this little flicking tongue right in front of her face, looking out one of the windows in the castle. I mean, he had just been different his whole life, and I was not ready for him. We did the best we could with him, but he was so outside of our imagination. And I thought I was creative and had a big imagination, but never has it been stretched like that. I won't ever forget the pastor at First Baptist Church, Hendersonville, called me one day. He was an old Alabama football fan, so he and I were buddies. He said, well, preacher, Church of Christ then. He said, I don't know how to tell you this, but your boy is Baptist now. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, our janitor at the church came to get me out of my office and told me to go into the sanctuary, and I did, and there was your boy and 2 of my Baptist boys swimming in the baptistry up there. And they had on plaid boxer shorts and white T-shirts like the front cover of the Blink-182 album. And and they were having the best time. And so I explained to him that he's now Baptist and we require tithing. And he had no boundaries. He just, if he could see it and imagine it and believe it. He didn't understand why we weren't doing it. Every trip I ever went on to another country, he was there. I thought I was on the cutting edge, but he was making me so nervous on all of them.